Hey guys, so today I thought that I would share my labor and delivery story with you. It's a doozy. And before I get started, I feel like I need to kind of backtrack to my video about my third trimester because that will kind of lead into what happened for the arrival of precious little Kennedy. In my third trimester video, I told you guys that I was terrified because I went to the doctor, and when they did a blood draw, the midwife said that my platelets were really low. Basically what that means is that if I were to bleed, my blood would not clot very easily. It's very thin. So obviously not good if you are going to be delivering, because you will bleed during either a C-section or a vaginal delivery. So it's more difficult for your blood to clot, and it just takes more time. Now, besides that, when your blood platelets are low, they do not want to do an epidural. So my doctor told me that some anesthesiologists will not do an epidural on somebody who has a platelet count below 130. So that was terrifying to me because I had always planned, like, that was my one thing. I was like, okay, I can do this. I do want to have pain management. I want to have an epidural to kind of help me through it. So when I found that out, just a couple weeks before I was about to give birth, I freaked out. I was so nervous. It's literally all I could think about. And so, but I came to a point where I was just like, okay, well, if it's gonna be this way, then it's gonna be this way, and I can do it. You know, women have done it for years and years and years. And so I just kind of have to play it by ear. So I had kind of come to terms with that. So my due date was October 27th, 2019. And, you know, everyone knows if you have kids, as you inch closer and closer to your due date, people start giving you all of these like recipes for how to induce labor. And I wasn't really interested in that. Yes, of course, I wanted my baby to be out, but like all the way through my, third trimester, I was just kind of like, okay, like it'll happen when it happens. I was feeling fine. You know, people were recommending castor oil, and I was not doing that. People were recommending curb walking and walking for really long distances, and I did both of those things, and it didn't really do anything. So one person had recommended this tea. It was like raspberry leaf tea or something like that, which I thought was a little bit different. So, the 20th rolls around, the 21st, 22nd, 23rd. I was feeling fine until the 26th. On the 26th, I was just like, I'm done being pregnant. I want this baby out. I don't want to do it anymore. Let's just get this over with. So that day, I woke up like that, and by that time, it's hard to get out of bed. You're like a meatball, trying to roll yourself out of bed. It's just, I had come to the point where I was like really uncomfortable. So, and you're swollen. It's just, it's not pretty. So that morning, I roll myself out of bed, and Ricky went to the gym, and I was just kind of like puttering around the house, and I decided to go get this tea. And I knew it was only sold at like specialty stores, and we have a Sprouts pretty close to our house. So I drove over to Sprouts and I picked up this tea. It was red raspberry leaf tea. And I'm not a tea drinker, so it's kind of like, eh. But if it was going to like help induce labor, then I was going to do anything except for castor oil. So and actually this raspberry leaf tea isn't supposed to induce labor. It's just supposed to, like, when the contractions start, it's supposed to like intensify them to make labor progress quickly. So I get this raspberry leaf tea from Sprouts, and I go home and I make myself a cup. I stick it in the microwave and I drink this tea. And thank goodness, I only put one tea bag and about 8 ounces of water. It was like enough to fill a coffee mug. And I start drinking it, and I'm just sitting at the counter. And before this, I had like Braxton Hicks contractions, but they were like nothing, it was no big deal. I knew it wasn't the real thing. So I finished the tea, And it's not like I chugged it or anything like that. I just like sipped on it because it doesn't taste, it's not bad, but like I said, I'm not a tea drinker. So I'm sitting at the counter, I finish the tea, and all of a sudden I start feeling contractions. And I'm like, okay, these are a little bit more than Braxton Hicks contractions, and my due date is tomorrow, so, you know, maybe this is it. But it wasn't intense, like it didn't hurt enough for me to take it seriously. So I go upstairs and I'm like, again, just doing stuff around the house, and they start to get a little bit more intense. So I text Ricky and I'm like, hey, you know, these contractions are getting a little bit more intense. Like, maybe you should come home. So he came home from the gym, and when he got home, he was like, how are you feeling? You know, do we need to go to the hospital? He's freaking out more than I am. And I'm like, no, I think it's fine. And keep in mind, our hospital where I had to deliver was 45 minutes away, about 40 minutes, and without traffic. And so I had heard horror stories of women, you know, going to the hospital and then getting sent home and then having to come back. And I really didn't want that because it was so far away. And I wanted to make sure that when we were going to the hospital, it was like for real, you know? I didn't want to just make these back and forth trips. So, and I knew I had to start timing them once they started getting intense. So I'm like, let me just go take a shower and start to get ready just in case. So I go upstairs, I take a shower, and in the shower, I'm kind of like, whew, these are kind of hurting. And I get out of the shower, I start doing my makeup, and I'm literally doing my makeup in between contractions. You know, like I started timing them on my phone at that point because I found an app that would time them. So you would like start the timer when the contraction started, click the timer when they stopped, and then it would show you like, you know, you had a contraction for 1 minute long and 4 minutes apart, that sort of thing. So I was doing my makeup in between those contractions because they were getting a little bit more intense, but still I didn't think it was enough to go to the hospital. So I'm done doing my makeup. I go downstairs. The bags had already been like in Ricky's car for a couple weeks, so I wasn't really worried about like putting together anything or anything like that. So I go downstairs, and Ricky again, he asked, you know, like, are you okay? Like, are you sure we don't need to go? And by then I was kind of like, maybe we do need to go. Like, they were getting pretty painful. So we hop in the car, go to the hospital. Well, attempt to go to the hospital. We get on the freeway. Sorry, my phone went off. We get on the freeway and it's dead stopped. This was at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So, it was not an ideal time to be hopping on the freeway trying to drive 45 minutes because literally on that freeway, it's always dead stop traffic for, you know, until you get to the next intersection, next like freeway interchange. So I'm like, and right when we get in the car, I'm like, this is it. Like, we're gonna have this baby tonight. And I am in pain and I'm still timing my contractions. When I started, they were probably like, you know, a minute long contractions, like 5 minutes apart. Like when I was doing my makeup, 5-6 minutes apart. By the time we were in the car, they were, you know, 2 minute long contractions, 2 minutes apart. Like it was pretty much like a constant amount of pain. So we're dead stopped on the freeway as soon as we get on the freeway by my house. And I'm like, okay, after this, like it will clear up. No, it did not. So we were in traffic the entire way from getting on the freeway by my house to the hospital. So that 40-minute drive took about an hour and 30 minutes. And I was wailing, wailing. I was dying. By the time we got to the hospital, my contractions were 4-5 minutes long, a minute apart. Like I was in pain. And so we were irresponsible and we never did our maternity tour because I was like, it's fine. We don't need to go do that. I don't want to go walk around a hospital. Like we'll find it. It's fine. It was not fine. We pull up to the hospital and we see a sign that says deliveries. And Ricky goes, is that where it is? I'm like, trying to scream in between contractions. Like, no, that's for like UPS deliveries. That's not like delivering a baby. I'm like, look for the stork, look for the stork. Because most hospitals will have a stork right above where labor and delivery is so that it's easy to find. We never found the stork. So we park by emergency in like the 30-minute parking zone or whatever. And we walk in and I am like keeled over. Like I can barely walk. I am dying. And we see this kid, he's probably like 16. I'm sure he was like a volunteer. Like he was so young. And we're like, I couldn't talk. Ricky was like, can you tell us where labor and delivery is? And he looks at me and he's like, oh my gosh, yeah. So he runs and gets a wheelchair for me. Bless this child, because it was bad. And I get in the wheelchair and I'm still like whining, I guess. And he's like, it's up on floor 3. Or I don't remember what floor it was on. So he takes us in the elevator to floor 3. And he's like, okay, this way. And we go the way that he tells us. And the ladies, the nurses in there were like, oh no, this isn't it. You'll see us later. Because that was like the recovery area. I'm like, where is this? So this nurse takes us to like just across the hall to where I needed to check in. So we, and I vividly remember, you know, there's those doors where you just push the button and the door opens. And I push the button, or Ricky pushed the button, whoever pushed the button. So the doors open and there's this lady just standing right in the walkway, like totally oblivious to what's going on around her. And I'm like, you know, trying to talk like, excuse me. And she just wasn't like, I wanted to be like, earth to the lady in the purple jacket, you know? So finally she realizes that we're behind her trying to get through, and she moves out of the way, and we get to the nurse's like check-in station. It was just like the movies, guys. Like I was like healed over, couldn't talk, like wailing. Ricky's trying to talk to the nurse. She asked for my insurance card and I just gave her my whole wallet. I was like, here you go, it's in here. Like I was just so focused on breathing. Like I remember that the thing that helped me through the contractions was just breathing. And you always see that in the movies, so that's just what I did, but it really did help a little bit. So I'm focused on breathing, and you know, she was like, you must be having a baby. And so she pulls us into a room, and I hear her as we're being pulled into the room. Sunny's barking, if you can hear that. I can hear the nurse say, oh, she's in active labor. And so I get put into the room, and I had the sweetest nurse. Her name was Audrey. She kept calling me mama, and I was probably not very pleasant. You know, like especially like in a customer service type of environment, I'm very like, you know, please and thank yous and all of that. But I was probably not super friendly at that point. But she was the sweetest. So she gets me in the room and she tells me to like undress, put on the gown, all that kind of stuff. And I'm doing my best at doing that. I get in the bed and she's like, okay, the midwife is going to be in a minute. She's going to check you. And I was just at that point praying. She's like, she said, are you having a baby tonight? And I was like, I sure hope so, because if this isn't the real thing, then I am petrified of what is in my near future. Because I was just thinking, like, if this isn't the real thing, I'm going to die of pain. Like, this is awful. So sure enough, the midwife comes in pretty quickly. She checks me and she's like, you're 5 centimeters dilated and you're going to have a baby tonight. So I was like so excited, but at the same time still in so much pain. And she asked me, are you going to have an epidural? And I said, I really want one, but I have to be honest, at my last appointment when they did the blood draw, my nurse practitioner said, you know, some anesthesiologists won't do it because my platelet count was so low. And she's like, what was it? And I said, it was 125. I think that's what it was at the time. And she's like, okay, so I'm going to page the anesthesiologist just in case so that he can like at least know that he needs to come down here if you can get one, and we're going to do a blood draw again. So they do the blood draw again, and drum roll, when I get my results, they were 135. And I was just like, I wanted to cry because I was just so thankful. So at that point, you know, I knew I was going to get an epidural. It was just a matter of actually receiving it because I'm still having these contractions and they're intensifying as time goes on. So nurse is taking care of me. She's getting me all hooked up, and I asked her, I was like, so when is the anesthesiologist coming? When is he coming? And she's like, he's coming soon, mama. And I'm like, oh my God, like how soon is soon, And I was thinking this is gonna take forever, and I was just, another thing that really helped me besides breathing once I got into the bed was wiggling my toes, and I have no idea why. I don't know if it just gave me something to concentrate on, but like wiggling my toes, like, I don't know, until they got tired, like they were like this. And then obviously breathing was what really helped me. Weird, I know, but it did. So at that point, I'm just in waiting mode. I'm waiting for the anesthesiologist to come in. Ricky is just looking at me like he's just seen a ghost, because he can tell that I'm in so much pain. Like, I know he's never seen me like wail like that, And when we were in the car, I knew that he was stressing out because he wanted to get us there so fast, but there was just nothing he could do. And there was one point when we were in the car where he like pulled into another lane. And when you're pulling into another lane, but you're too tight to the person that's in front of you, so it's a very close, like you could easily like clip the car that's in front of you before you're trying to get into the other lane. Well, that happened, and I was like, oh my God, that's all we need right now is to get into a freaking car accident when I'm in labor and hold up this whole process even more. So anyways, it was close, but we didn't get into a car accident, thank the Lord. So we are waiting. The anesthesiologist finally comes in, and actually I was thinking, because like you see sometimes in the movies or when other people tell their stories that they're waiting hours for an epidural, and I did not. So thank the Lord, he came quickly, and he was super nice. He comes in, and he has you sit up in the bed, and he's got whatever he's got going on behind me. I didn't even care if he was taking out like a chainsaw to put in my back at that point. I was like, give it to me now. So I'm sitting there, and he's like, you're gonna feel a little pinch. I'm like, okay. Like I did not care. And that little pinch, I was like, honey, you have clearly never had any babies, because that little pinch was nothing in comparison to what I'm feeling right now. I didn't say that, but I was definitely thinking it. So I thought when you would get an epidural, like I thought it would be immediate pain, because there's been a time where they thought my appendix were bursting. They thought I had appendicitis, and so I went to the hospital because I had severe stomach pain, so they hooked me up to a morphine drip. And when they hooked me up to that morphine drip, I remember it was an immediate rush of relief. I was in that much pain. So when I got the epidural, I thought for sure it would be like an immediate like wave of relief. It was not. It kind of took, at least, well, what felt like hours, but at least a few minutes for me to feel any sort of relief. And so much so that he was like, do you feel it? Do you feel it? I'm like, no, I'm still in a lot of pain. So he's like, you're gonna feel it come from your toes up. And I was like, okay, just waiting, and I remember just hoping, like, I hope this kicks in before the next contraction. I hope this kicks in before the next one. And then I would have another contraction, and I'd be like, I hope it kicks in before that next one. Finally, it did. It definitely did go up from like my toes to like my hip area. And he asked if I felt the contractions more on one side versus the other, and I said yeah, I felt it more on my left side. So he had the nurse turn me on to that side, so that he said something about the medicine like traveling down to that area. I don't know, it did help. So eventually I was completely numb from the hips down, and I took a nap. So after I felt that relief, I fell asleep for a little bit of time, and then I woke up, and there were people, coming in and out, like in-laws, my mom, my sister, all of that kind of stuff. And I was able to actually communicate effectively at that point. And then all of a sudden I started feeling a little nauseous, and they were like, even before, when the midwife came in and checked me, she was like, did your water break? I was like, I don't think so. And I was like, but I did pee myself a lot on earlier today. And she was like, are you sure it was pee? I was like, I know, like I smelled it. And so she was like, okay. So she came and checked me again at that point to see if I had dilated further, and I had, and she was like, your water definitely broke, like I could feel it in there, like I can feel the sac. So she was like, because your water probably broke once you started feeling those more intense contractions at around like 3 p.m. at that point, then if it stays in there for a longer period of time, you can feel sort of nauseous and your temperature could go up. And so I did have a temperature, so they had to give me some antibiotics or something to bring that down and prevent any infection. And at that point, I still felt a little nauseous, but like I would have taken anything over those contractions, so I was fine. They kept coming in and out and checking my, to see if I was dilating, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, she said, okay, you're at 10, let's go. So I'm like, okay. And right before the nurse came in, like I had a feeling that I was getting close. So you know, you have like the little epidural thing, you can like bump it up a little bit, because I'd always heard that once you are ready to push, they'll knock that down a little bit so that you can feel your contractions and actually feel what's going on. I did not want to feel any of that. So I bumped it up a little bit, and I did still feel like I knew when I was having a contraction. She was like, that's all that matters, because that's when you're gonna have to push. So by that time I had a new nurse in, because Audrey had already left for the day. And so she was super sweet, and she was really, really nice, but really quiet. And so when she said, okay, it's time to push, that was at 3 a.m. and the nurse practitioner or midwife came in, and then also the charge nurse. Now the charge nurse was like so different from the nurse that I had at the time. Like she was loud, she had tattoos everywhere, she was just like, she was so good. And the reason why I say that is because at 3 a.m. when I started pushing, she was so motivating, guys. It was like having a personal trainer overlook you doing planks. Like she was like a cheerleader, but in the best way possible. Like not annoying. She was just like, okay, you know, you got it, you got it, you got it, push, 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 like get mad, get mad, get mad. And I needed that, because the other nurse, although she was super sweet, she was just so quiet, you know, like I needed somebody to be like, come on. And so I felt very lucky to have that lady there. And in the room, I only had Ricky and my mom. And so it didn't feel like a ton of people in there. It was Ricky, my mom, the loud charge nurse, my midwife or nurse practitioner, and then the nurse that I had taking care of me after Audrey left. So 3 a.m. I started pushing, and in the middle of pushing, they thought that they were gonna have to give me something to kind of make it progress. I can't remember what it was, but they didn't end up having to do that. The midwife, you know, I'm in the middle of pushing, and the midwife says, did your doctor talk to you about your episiotomy options? And I was like, no, what is that? Like, I wasn't really thinking about what it was. I do know what it is. But she was like, well, you have a choice, and you could have talked to her about whether, if it came to this, if you wanted to tear or if you wanted to be cut. And I said, it was not really something you really want to hear in the middle of pushing. So I said, well, I guess be cut. I'd rather have like a clean cut so that it can be sewn together really easily, right? And she was like, oh, not necessarily, but we'll see how this goes. I'm like, okay, great. So at that point I knew, I was like, okay, I'm going to tear. Like this is going to be not the easiest recovery. But I kept pushing, 3:52, Kennedy was here. And it is the most insane feeling in the world to hear your baby cry, know that it's over, hold your baby. Like I could just cry thinking about it. It had exceeded all of my expectations from what everybody had told me. And oh my gosh, it was just the best. And I was so lucky that she was healthy and that everything, you know, went okay. They took her off to the side and weighed her and measured her and all of that. And it was just like pure heaven at that point. And the doctor did tell me after that she did cut me. Well, actually Ricky did. So at one point during the pushing session, I heard her tell Ricky to don't look at this part, to look at me. And I was like, what the heck is going on down there? But I was obviously preoccupied, and he told me later that that's when, because I asked him, I was like, I want to know like what happened down there at that point. And he's like, oh, that's when she cut you. And I was looking, and she told me to look away. I'm like, oh, it must have been like not very nice to look at, because I'm sure she told him that because it was not pleasant. But so yeah, Ricky cut the umbilical cord. That is my labor and delivery story. The rest of the time that we were in the hospital felt like weeks, but we left on the 28th. So she was born at 3:52 a.m. on her due date, October 27th, and we left the morning of, well, like 11:30 a.m. on October 28th. So the recovery was definitely more than I had anticipated, but feeling fine now. And I just had my 6-week postpartum checkup a couple days ago, and everything looked good. So I am just enjoying the newborn life. So let me introduce you to her, because I know some of you guys have seen her, but maybe some of you haven't. Are you gonna wake up for the camera? Are you gonna wake up? She is in the middle of taking a nap, so we are wearing our army outfits today, aren't we? I'm wearing my army leggings, and she's wearing her army sweater. So if you guys follow me on Instagram, then you have definitely seen her. So if you don't follow me on Instagram, you should, because you'll see lots of baby pictures and fun stuff like that, huh? But thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you are pregnant, or if you are about to give birth and that's why you're here, just know that it will all be okay. You can do it, and you are going to be fantastic. And whatever everybody tells you about how painful it is, or how uncomfortable they are and all of that, like, you will not remember it the next day. I promise you. Yes, I was in pain, but I don't remember what that was like anymore. Once you hold your baby in your hands, it all goes away, and you can totally do it. So, right? You got this. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.